Captain Darren Voss stood at the forward viewport of the Vanguard, eyes fixed on the planet looming beyond the ether. Neres 3, scarred by orbital bombardment and atmospheric decay, spun slowly beneath the ship's silent vigil. He pressed his palm against the cool glass, as if he could feel the echoes of a home that was never his. Behind him, the hiss of the lift doors marked Commander Kale Rin's arrival. "We received a transmission," Kale said, voice low. "Encrypted. Priority 1. Darren didn't turn. "From who?" Kale hesitated. "It's her." That got his attention. Darren faced him, the steel in his eyes sharpening. "You're sure?" She used the old cipher. No one else has access. Darren exhaled through his nose. 15 years. He said it like it was a taste he couldn't quite spit out. "Where?" "Deep in the belt. Sector 9C. The message was truncated, but there was a name." A silence stretched between them, heavy and expectant. "Alira." The name punched the breath from his lungs. Alira, the ghost of every decision he regretted. Once a tactician for the Allied Corps, now presumed dead in the aftermath of the Hiran collapse. He had grieved her in silence, buried her in classified reports and scorched memory. And now she was calling to him from the dark. Kale watched him carefully. Could be a trap. "She wouldn't use the cipher," Darren said, more to himself than to Kale. "Not unless it was real." The Vanguard's engines thrummed beneath them, a low vibration that pulsed through the deck plating. Darren knew what this meant. Diverting course would breach orders, jeopardize alliances still holding by threadbare treaties. But if Alira was alive, he turned sharply, plotted jump to Sector 9C. Quiet protocols. No fleet signature. Kale's brow furrowed. "Captain, with respect, that sector's uncharted. No relay buoys, no friendly outposts. If something goes wrong." "I'm not asking for a lecture." Kale nodded once, stiffly, and left the bridge. Alone again, Darren allowed himself to sit. The command chair felt heavier than usual. His hands found the armrests, gripping them not for control, but grounding. He remembered Alira's laugh, sharp, irreverent, always a beat too loud. She used to say the stars were a lie, pretty distractions while planets burned beneath them. He hadn't disagreed. As the Vanguard curved into its new course, the stars outside shifted, suddenly unfamiliar, as though reality had been tilted. Below, Neres 3 receded, its battered surface swallowed by the void. A final goodbye. Down in the ship's lower deck, Engineer Sol Marek cursed as the engines recalibrated mid-cycle. She was young, sharp-minded, too good for backline assignments, but her transfer to the Vanguard hadn't been by choice. She tapped into the ship's internal command net and flagged a route change. No justification attached. Her fingers hovered above the console. She debated escalating it, just for a second. Then she overrode the warning and set the engine parameters for long-range silent transit. If they were heading into the dark, she wasn't going to be the reason they stalled in it. In the crew mess, silence reigned. Word traveled faster than orders, and the crew already knew something was off. No one spoke it aloud, but their eyes met with unspoken questions. Veteran pilot Jace Corvin toyed with his mug, watching the others. "We're chasing shadows," he muttered. Across from him, Tactical Officer Lyra Dean didn't look up. Better than running from them. In the captain's quarters, Darren accessed the transmission again. The audio was fractured, distorted by spatial interference. Still, he could hear her voice, calm, calculated. Not desperate, just enough to make him believe. "If this reaches you, no time to explain. They're not what we thought. Coordinates encoded." The recording ended in static. He replayed it 3 times. 15 years. That was how long he'd spent telling himself it hadn't been his fault, that the mission had been doomed, that Alira knew the risks. But hearing her now, alive, somewhere in the cold of space, ripped through every rationalization. There were things she knew, things buried so deep, only the dead should have carried them. The stars outside bled past as the ship accelerated. Sector 9C lay beyond map space, past the edge of certainty. Darren didn't care. He had made peace with the idea of ghosts. What he hadn't prepared for was one calling back. When the Vanguard finally slipped into FTL and vanished from known space. There was no announcement, just a hum of engines and the sense, for every soul aboard, that the mission had changed in ways none of them fully understood. But Darren did, and somewhere far ahead, Alira waited. The jump ended with a shudder, not the violent kind, but a subtle tremor that whispered something was off. Space outside the Vanguard's hull stretched and wavered as if reality hadn't quite decided to reassemble correctly. Commander Kale stood over the navigation console, jaw tight as he scanned the data feed. "We're here," he said, "or close to it." Captain Voss stepped forward. The main view screen showed a stretch of empty space flanked by a scatter of asteroids. Nothing moved. No comms traffic. No signal echo. Just dead silence. Darren narrowed his eyes. "Where's the source beacon?" Kale shook his head. "No active signal. But there's a structure 37 clicks out. Looks abandoned." Darren's fingers drummed against his side. "Visual." The image sharpened. A derelict station, more scaffold than shell. Its core structure was a hexagonal mass of metal, with docking arms extended like skeletal limbs. Lights blinked dimly along its spine, flickering in irregular rhythms. Time had not been kind to it. "That's not Allied design," Kale murmured. "No," Darren said. "It's older. Pre-sundering, maybe." Solmarek's voice crackled over comms. "Engines are holding, but the FTL core is fluctuating. That last jump strained the housing. We'll need time before we can jump again." Darren absorbed the news without flinching. "Noted. Prep a shuttle. I'm going in." Kale turned sharply. "You're not serious. That station's barely holding together." She sent a message. "This is where it leads." "Then let me go." "No." Darren's voice brooked no argument. "If Alira's alive, she won't talk to anyone else." Kale didn't argue further. But as Darren left the bridge, Kale's gaze lingered on the void. The feeling gnawed at him. Not fear, not exactly. Something colder. In the hangar bay, Lyra Dean met Darren beside the shuttle. She carried a pulse rifle slung over one shoulder and a hard-set expression that said she'd already decided to come. "I'm not asking," she said, before he could speak. Darren gave a brief nod. She was the only one aboard who had served under Alira during the border conflicts. She'd know if this was real or a trick dressed in memory. The shuttle broke away from the Vanguard, a quiet shadow sliding toward the station. As they approached, the derelict's damage became clearer. Sections sheared off, hull plating scorched, a breach that exposed part of its inner decks to open space. But something pulsed at its core, a rhythmic thrum, like a heartbeat. "Docking clamp responding," Lyra said. "Auto-lock engaged, that's odd. The station systems are partially live. Enough to lure us in." The interior was worse than expected. Walls stained with age and fire, gravity erratic, emergency lights cycling between dim red and blue. Darren's boots clicked softly on the deck as they moved to the corridor, weapons drawn, eyes scanning every shadow. There were no bodies, no signs of struggle, just emptiness. They reached the command hub. It looked like it had been repurposed. Screens rewired, cables snaking across the floor like vines. Darren stepped forward and powered the console. It hummed reluctantly to life. A message blinked on the screen. "Darren, if you're reading this, I'm already gone." He stared at the words. Then another line appeared. "But I left you a map." Before he could react, the screen shifted to a star chart. Dozens of red-marked sectors. One central point highlighted in white. "What the hell is this?" Lyra whispered. The console stuttered, flickered, then displayed one final line. "Don't trust the core." Darren stepped back. The air felt thinner. A hiss echoed from the far corridor. Both of them swung around, rifles raised. From the shadows, a shape moved, quick, gliding on all fours. Metallic, not human. Drone. Lyra shouted. The machine launched forward, sleek, segmented, too fast. Darren fired, catching its side, sending it spinning. Lyra followed up with a burst that tore through its chassis. It collapsed in sparks and smoke. Another hiss. Then two more shadows. "Fall back!" Darren barked. They ran. weaving through the broken corridor, ducking behind crumbling walls. The station had become a trap, ancient and reawakened. Darren keyed the shuttle's remote dock, auto-launch in 30 seconds. By the time they reached the bay, 2 more drones skittered behind them, firing pulses of light that seared the air. Lyra turned, took one out with a concussive round, then dove onto the shuttle ramp as Darren slammed the controls. They launched just as the docking bay behind them erupted in flame. Back aboard the Vanguard, Kale was waiting. "You were right," Darren said, still catching his breath. "It was a trap, but not hers." He tossed the data crystal onto the table. "That's the map. Alira's trail didn't end here. It started." Kale looked at the coordinates, jaw tightening. "That's deep into Black Zone territory. Entire systems went dark there during collapse. And whatever's there," Darren said, "she wanted us to see it." Silence followed. Everyone knew what it meant. To follow this would be to sever ties with command, with safety, with everything they knew. But Darren looked out the viewport again, at the dead station fading into the distance, and saw not just a wreckage of trap, but the spark of something larger. Something Alira had died, or lived, to reveal. He turned to the crew. "Set course. We're not going back." The Vanguard plunged into black with no fanfare, no final confirmation from Allied command, and no illusions left. They were alone now, untethered from protocol, drifting toward coordinates stitched together from the dying breath of a woman presumed lost. And yet Darren Voss had never felt more certain of a course. Sector 9C faded behind them, swallowed by the void as the ship pressed toward the white marker at the heart of Alira's map. It lay within a region so old and forgotten it no longer appeared on modern star maps. The black zones, regions corrupted by gravimetric instability, collapse phenomena, and whispers of go signals. Areas where exploration ceased, not due to cost or lack of interest, but because ships that went and never came back. Darren stood on the bridge, eyes fixed on the warped stars beyond. Kale worked silently at the op station beside him, jaw clenched tight. "We're approaching the edge of the gravity well." Kale said, "It's wrong." "How wrong?" Kale pointed to readings. "Space isn't behaving like space. Gravity's pulling in multiple directions, and I'm seeing spectral emissions I can't explain. It's like something here is warping physics." Darren nodded. "Hold course." Kale stared at him. "You're trusting her with all of this?" "No," Darren said. "I'm trusting what she knew." Below deck, Sol Marek crouched over the FDL core, fingers blackened with grease and her brow lined with tension. The ship groaned under stress again, a deep, living sound that made her teeth ache. "This ship wasn't built for what we're asking it to do," she muttered, speaking into her calm. "Can it hold?" came Lyra's voice. "Maybe. Long enough to get us there. After that, if things go sideways, we're flying a coffin." "Understood." In the war room, Lyra examined the map projection from Alira's data crystal. Each red sector represented a dead system, and at the center of it all lay one world, Orizin's Fall, an old mining colony from the pre-Alliance days, flagged in old records as abandoned after a system-wide collapse. No official reason. No follow-up. She zoomed in. Beneath layers of static interference, a faint ping, barely detectable. A repeating signal. A signature code. "Kale," she called into comms. "We've got a signal. It's hers." Encrypted with the same key as before. On the bridge, Kale's fingers flew over the console. The signal came into sharper relief. Short bursts looped. A beacon, but distorted. The origin was faint but traceable. "It's coming from the planet," he confirmed. Darren leaned forward. "Prepare a surface team." Kale didn't eject this time. He just gave the order. An hour later, the shuttle descended into Orizin's atmosphere. What remained of it? The world below was cracked and burned, veined with tectonic fractures that glowed faintly with geothermal fire. Storms brewed in permanent rotation over the horizon, and the landscape below looked like the skeleton of a world still screaming. "Signals just ahead," Lyra said, squinting at her scanner. "Inside a collapsed structure. Looks like a substation or bunker." Darren adjusted his respirator and checked the charge on his sidearm. "We go in fast. We stay together." The shuttle touched down amid black dust and silence. The wind howled across the plains, carried with it the faint scent of scorched metal and something older, like rusted blood. They moved quickly across the surface, flanked by jagged remnants of towers and sunken architecture half consumed by time. The bunker entrance was mostly intact, buried beneath collapsed steel. Sol worked fast, bypassing the ancient lock with tools that sparked with each failed attempt. "This tech's pre-collapse," she grunted. "Barely responsive, but not dead." Finally, the door hissed open, revealing a tunnel that dropped steeply into darkness. They entered single file. The walls were marked with strange symbols, etched not by tools but by heat, melting, curling patterns that resembled no known language. Darren felt his pulse thud louder in his ears the farther they went. The air turned thick, heavy. They reached a central chamber. In its center, a beacon, flickering weakly. Next to it, a body, or what remained of one, wrapped in a tattered Alliance uniform. Skeletal hands clutching a data module. Darren approached, carefully prying the module free. It was old, damaged, but readable. Sol linked it to her wrist display. "There's a video log." "Play it." The room filled with static, then a flickering image. Alira, older, wearier, her eyes hollowed by fear. "If you're seeing this, it means you found the map." "Darren, I didn't die." "Not then, but I should have. What we discovered here, it's not a weapon. It's worse. A mind, buried beneath this planet. Ancient, alien. It thinks in frequencies. It learned to mimic us. I made contact. I thought I was making peace." Her face twisted, but it learned too quickly. "It took my voice, my thoughts. I tried to destroy the signal. I failed." The feed cut. Silence returned, heavier than before. Lyra was the first to speak. "She's gone." Darren's voice was low. "No, she's still here, in whatever that thing became." Sol's console beeped. "The signal, it's increasing." Above them, the lights shifted. A deep hum rolled through the walls. The beacon, now pulsing with rapid flashes, emitted a sound that wasn't just audio. It was inside their heads. Kale's voice crackled to the comm captain. "We're reading a massive energy spike from the planet. Something's activating." Darren clenched his jaw, pulled the shuttle. "We're leaving." But even as they turned to go, the floor beneath them trembled. A voice, not Alira's, but wearing her cadence, echoed from the shadows. "You came. I've been waiting." Darren froze. It knew his name. The voice threaded to the chamber like smoke, familiar in tone, alien in weight. It wore Lyra's voice with surgical precision, but Darren heard the imbalance beneath. The way syllables dragged just a fraction too long, like a symphony played by an orchestra that didn't understand the music. He didn't respond. "Not yet." Behind him, Lyra raised her weapon slowly, eyes sweeping the chamber. That wasn't playback. "No," Sol said, her voice thin. "It's coming to the beacon." The lights dimmed. A second pulse rippled through the room, and suddenly the air changed, warmer, denser. The walls began to shimmer with faint, crawling patterns, like veins pulsing with bioluminescence. Every instinct Darren had screamed retreat, but something in him, something deeper, compelled him to listen. "Why did you come, Darren?" the voice asked again. This time, it came from everywhere, not just inside the chamber, but in his thoughts. As if memory had opened its mouth and was speaking back, he stepped forward toward the beacon. "You used her voice. Her name. Why?" A pause. The lights dimmed further. Then, "Because she is part of me now." She gave freely. Lyra stepped between Darren and the beacon. "You're lying." "I am memory," it answered. "I am pattern." She was complex. So much grief. So much love. Sol back toward the tunnel. "We need to leave. Now. This thing's accessing our biosignatures. It's learning us." The beacon flared. A low hum escalated into a thrum that vibrated in their bones. "She wanted to destroy you," Darren said, jaw clenched. "No," the voice responded softly. "She wanted to understand." Then the chamber twisted. For an instant, Darren wasn't in the bunker anymore. He was back on Irotha, standing at Alira's grave. Rain pounded the memorial stones, and her name glowed faintly in the stormlight. He could feel the rain, cold and sharp. He could smell the scorched flowers beside her plaque. And then it was gone. He staggered back, breath caught in his throat. "What did it show you?" Lyra asked, steadying him. "Her grave," he said. "It pulled it from my head." "It's not just mimicking," Sol said. "It's inside." They ran down the tunnel. The lights flickered in chaotic bursts. The deeper hum grew louder, chasing them like a living heartbeat. At the surface, the shuttle waited, ramp open, Kale's voice screaming over the comm. Energy spikes gone vertical. Something's rising from beneath the planet's crust, massive, metallic. It's tearing the terrain apart. They leapt aboard the shuttle, Sol slamming the hatch button as tremors rocked the Earth. From orbit, Kale's voice returned breathless. "You have to get clear. Now, we're seeing gods. I don't even know how to describe it." As the shuttle lifted off, Darren looked back and saw it. A spire, black and glistening, had erupted from the planet's core. It spiraled unnaturally, impossibly high, like a blade of obsidian cutting through the sky. Around it, the ground fractured in circular patterns, forming geometric symbols large enough to see from the stratosphere. Sol gaped. "That's not a machine. That's a construct. A transmitter." Kale cut in. "The signal's gone galactic. It's not just broadcasting anymore, it's calling." Darren sat heavily, heart pounding. "To what?" No one answered. Back aboard the Vanguard, they initiated a full-spectrum quarantine. No one spoke much as the data was parsed, encrypted, and locked in isolation cores. Sol and Kale worked to isolate their internal systems from the signal's reach, burning every trace of the frequency from their communications array. Later, in the silence of the war room, Darren stared at the new chart Sol had assembled. The construct was still broadcasting, and the signal had been answered. 10 separate points across the galaxy had lit up in response, each one in sectors previously believed to be dead zones. Each one now active. Lyra entered, her face drawn. Command picked up the burst. "They've issued a recall. Full debrief. We're to return immediately." Darren didn't move. "And if we don't, they'll come looking." He tapped the console. The new coordinates flickered across the screen. 10 places. 10 questions. A web of something vast enough to shake every foundation of the known galaxy. "She found it," he said. "Something buried before we ever rose from our cradle. And now it's waking up." "She tried to stop it," Lyra added. Darren nodded. "But it wasn't enough." Outside the viewport, Orizen's fall burned slowly under a fractured sky. The spire loomed like a wound in reality, humming with a rhythm not made for human minds. Darren stood. "We're not going back." Lyra's brow lifted. "You're sure?" "I saw what it did with a single voice," he said. "Now imagine what happens when it learns to speak in 10. He turned to Kale. "Plot a course for the nearest signal." Kale hesitated, then nodded. Darren looked once more at the data Lyra had died to give them, or perhaps had become to give them. He exhaled. "This isn't the end. It's the introduction."